In November 2022, the doors to one of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchanges suddenly slammed shut. Millions of user accounts were frozen without warning. Customers logged in to find their balances locked. Everyday investors, many of whom had deposited their entire life savings onto the platform, were completely cut off from their funds. Behind closed doors, executives had discovered a massive deficit. An $8 billion hole had opened up in the company's balance sheet, practically overnight. Markets experience downturns and volatility all the time, but this was the sudden, complete vaporization of a platform that had heavily marketed itself as the safest harbor in crypto. To understand how a collapse of this magnitude occurs, we have to look at the man who built it. Just weeks before the crash, Sam Bankman-Fried was at the peak of his influence, widely hailed as a visionary. He cultivated a specific image, a genius sleeping on beanbags, playing games during pitch meetings, ignoring the norms of Wall Street. He aggressively promoted a philosophy known as effective altruism. He claimed his sole motivation for accumulating massive wealth was to eventually give it all away to solve humanity's greatest problems. This vocal commitment to data-driven philanthropy changed the way the public saw his business. Instead of investigating his balance sheets, regulators and the media began treating him as a moral outlier, trusting his word on the exchange's safety without the standard verification required for others. The empire began in 2017 with Alameda Research. It was built to be a highly secretive quantitative trading firm, executing aggressive, high-risk bets in the largely unregulated crypto markets. 2 years later, Bankman-Fried launched FTX. This was the consumer-facing product, marketed specifically as a stable, user-friendly exchange, a secure vault for everyday investors to buy and hold digital assets. This diagram illustrates the official relationship between the two companies. FTX is shown securing customer deposits on one side, separated by a thick regulatory firewall from Alameda's high-risk trading on the other. They were promised to be strictly isolated entities. By operating both a massive proprietary trading firm and the exchange platform where those trades occurred, Bankman-Fried centralized an enormous amount of power in the crypto ecosystem under his direct control. To manage the trading side, he turned to Carolyn Ellison. A highly intelligent mathematics graduate from Stanford, she eventually became the CEO of Alameda Research. Ellison shared Bankman-Fried's background in the effective altruism movement. He recruited her directly into his intensely insular inner circle, a small group that lived and worked together constantly. While Bankman-Fried acted as the political and public face of FTX, traveling to Washington and courting the press, Ellison remained behind closed doors, executing Alameda's aggressive market strategies. Bankman-Fried was busy constructing an untouchable public mythos. Meanwhile, Ellison was managing the hidden, increasingly volatile financial engine required to sustain it. To capture mainstream trust, FTX launched a massive marketing blitz. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars securing naming rights to sports stadiums and airing high-production commercials during the Super Bowl. They recruited apex-level athletes like Tom Brady, using their global recognition to validate the exchange as a completely safe investment platform for everyday consumers. Simultaneously, they relocated the FTX corporate headquarters to the Bahamas. While ostensibly done to find a friendly regulatory environment, this effectively placed their core operations completely out of the jurisdiction of U.S. regulators. This combination of intense celebrity validation and total offshore isolation created a dangerous ecosystem. The public perceived FTX as an institution too big to fail, even as its internal operations ran completely out of sight. By 2022, the reality inside Alameda Research was grim. The firm had taken on massive loans to fund poor, high-risk investments, and they were quietly suffering devastating financial losses. Looking at this updated diagram reveals exactly how they covered those losses. The solid firewall dissolves, showing a secret exemption hard-coded into the FTX software. This hidden digital pipeline allowed Alameda to bypass auto-liquidation entirely. Through this pipeline, over half of all FTX customer deposits, totaling billions of dollars, were quietly funneled out of user accounts and into Alameda Research to pay off its mounting debts. Bankman-Fried's team modified the exchange's core computer code to create this system, ensuring that customer deposits were always available to cover his firm's massive trading losses. In November 2022, a leaked document finally brought the scrutiny Bankman-Fried had avoided. Financial journalists got their hands on Alameda's balance sheet and started examining the numbers. They discovered the billions in assets propping up Alameda weren't real cash or independent cryptocurrencies. The vast majority of their stated value was held in FTT, a digital token invented and controlled entirely by FTX itself. The effect of this revelation was instantaneous. Rival exchanges dumped their holdings of the token. Panicked users rushed to withdraw their funds, triggering a massive, irreversible bank run that FTX could not cover. The entire empire was built on an illusion of absolute security and altruistic brilliance. When exposed to the truth, the very myth used to build the company became the exact reason it shattered overnight. In early November 2022, a quiet anxiety began creeping through the financial press. Rumors were circulating that something was deeply wrong at one of the world's most trusted cryptocurrency exchanges. A report published by CoinDesk revealed something alarming about FTX and its supposedly separate trading firm, Alameda Research. Alameda's balance sheet was heavily propped up by a single asset called FTT. FTT was a cryptocurrency invented by FTX itself. So you have the exchange on one side and the trading firm on the other, both entirely dependent on a digital asset that one of them created out of thin air. If the market ever lost faith in that specific token, the entire structure would collapse under its own weight. Overnight, the public image of a multi-billion-dollar financial fortress evaporated. What remained looked entirely hollow. Changpeng Zhao, the CEO of rival exchange Binance, read the report. He publicly announced he was liquidating his firm's massive holdings of FTT. That single statement broke the spell for millions of everyday customers. If the biggest players in the industry were rushing for the exits, the deposits held by ordinary users were in immediate danger. Panic took hold. Terrified users rushed to pull their assets off the platform, demanding an estimated $6 billion in withdrawals in just 72 hours. FTX simply did not have the cash on hand to pay them. The company halted all withdrawals, freezing millions of accounts instantly. People across the globe stared at their screens, looking at account balances representing their life savings, house deposits, and retirement funds. The numbers were right there, but the money was gone. For a brief window, it looked like a rescue was possible. Binance signed a letter of intent to buy FTX and make the customers whole. But the relief lasted exactly one day. Once Binance executives looked inside FTX's internal accounting, they abandoned the deal immediately. The panic exposed a staggering reality. $10 billion of everyday customer deposits had been quietly transferred from the exchange over to Alameda Research to cover the trading firm's massive losses. The company that had spent hundreds of millions of dollars to stamp its logo on sports arenas and umpire uniforms filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The court appointed John J. Ray III to take over. Ray had spent his career unwinding corporate disasters, including Enron. He testified that he had never seen such a complete failure of corporate controls. A platform entrusted with billions of dollars across the globe was running its accounting on QuickBooks. Customer deposits were treated as an unmonitored personal checking account for a tiny group of executives. Among that group was Carolyn Ellison, the CEO of Alameda Research. She was one of the architects of the trading strategy, but as the walls closed in, the burden of the lie became suffocating. In a video meeting with her remaining employees, Ellison broke down. She admitted that the core executive team had always known that FTX customer money was being siphoned to keep her firm afloat. The loyalty among the executives shattered instantly. Ellison and other top deputies quickly pleaded guilty to federal charges and agreed to tell investigators everything they knew. The very people who helped engineer the machine were the ones who dismantled it. The charismatic founder who had built a cult of personality around himself was left entirely isolated to face the wreckage. The story moved from a luxury penthouse in the Bahamas to the austere wood-paneled rooms of a federal courthouse in Manhattan. Stripped of his billionaire status and carefully curated visionary aura, Sam Bankman-Fried sat at the defense table, facing the severe reality of the justice system. One by one, his former friends and colleagues took the stand. They detailed how he directly orchestrated the theft of billions and knowingly lied to investors, lenders, and the public. His parents, both respected legal scholars, navigated crowds of reporters every day to watch the irrefutable public unraveling of their son's life. The defense tried to frame the collapse as a series of innocent business mistakes. The jury took only a few hours to reject that narrative, returning a guilty verdict on all 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy. The trial destroyed the carefully crafted image of the awkward, well-meaning math genius. It exposed a highly calculated scheme of mass deception driven by unimaginable hubris. The judge handed down a 25-year federal prison sentence. The man who promised to reshape global finance will spend the best decades of his life locked in a cell. Outside the courtroom, the physical remnants of his empire, the empty office floors and the severed sponsorships, serve as monuments to a deeply scarred industry. The collapse forces a painful question. Why did millions of people abandon basic financial due diligence to put their faith in a storyteller who simply wore t-shirts and promised to give his money away? Bankruptcy lawyers are slowly recovering the missing assets for the victims, but writing a check cannot erase the absolute violation of trust or the emotional trauma of having your security stolen by someone you believed in. We are drawn to charismatic figures who offer simple, messianic answers to complex problems. As long as we continue to seek out financial saviors, the architecture for the next great deception is already waiting to be built.